Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders. I'm the creator of the Food Lies documentary series. Make sure to check out that intro if you haven't yet. We're about done with episode one. Very excited. Going back to Hawaii for a month for the holidays. Going to work out on a lot with my director, editor, and get it out to some big studios very soon. Go back and listen to the old episodes. I might not do a bunch of episodes over this time. So go back and listen to the old ones. There's so many great ones, as I always say. This one today, another good one with Nora Gedgaudas. She wrote The Primal Body, Primal Mind. She's at the forefront of this primal paleo type of movement for decades. She's been at it for so long. She's very awakened. She's now kind of off grid. We talk about her homestead, we talk about the history of human nutrition, talk about Weston Price, lots of good stuff. So enjoy this one. We talk about well-raised meat, of course, like nose to tail. We talk about regenerative agriculture, how to raise animals properly. It's exactly what we do. We have the pasture-raised pork, actually. Take a look at that. We got some special prices on that. We got the beef tallow body care, hair products, deodorant. We got it all. This is the stuff I use. You don't want weird chemicals and additives in your body care products. You do not want to put lotions and hair products that soak up into your skin that are filled with unnatural oils, additives, plastics, all kinds of weird stuff. So we got the good stuff at nosetotale.org. So check that out, support our ranchers, and enjoy this one with Nora Gedgaudas. Hello, Nora. How's it going?
It's going great, Brian. I'm really glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yes. We just figured out that I saw you present at Paleo FX in 2019 and you haven't presented since. And now where are you?
I am actually at an undisclosed location on a mountainside in the wilds of Idaho and living completely off grid.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love it. We almost couldn't get this podcast going because you're just living the
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Technical problems. It's sort of like technology is something, the more I leave it behind me, the happier I am. So, nice to be reminded of where I came from and why.
It's great. No, you really are living that life. So we're going to get into that. But for people who don't know who you are, I've known about you for many years. You're kind of one of the big people that started this paleo movement, I guess you could call it, or primal. You wrote a book, Primal Body, Primal Mind, that I read years ago.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah, anything
wonderful.
else you can tell people about your past and your, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was in private practice for over 20 years in Oregon, doing something called neurofeedback and also as a nutritional consultant and whatnot. And my first love was nutritional science, but I thought, well, how does anybody make a living with that? So, but I had a very, very successful practice, and I found that when I applied nutritional principles I understood to be effective to my clients, that their outcomes were much, much better. And oh, it's a much, much longer story, but I was uh, I I was inspired by the results that I was getting from my clients to write my first book, mainly because nobody else would write it. I would talk to people about various things, and they'd say, "Well, where do you get this?" And it's like, "Well, is there a book I can read?" And it's like, "Well, yeah, no. I mean, I've got a library of books I could point you to, but that." So it started out with like a 10-page thing I stapled together and handed out to people. And then I thought, well, I forgot to say this and I should have talked about that and whatever. So I started adding, and eventually it mushroomed into this, small book that I was running to Kinko's and copying off and handing out to clients. And eventually I had some epiphanies that I thought, boy, I really have to retool this. And I really want to retool this and do it right. And I looked into getting it published. Almost had a publisher publish it, but then decided to self-publish to start with because I wanted to retain control of the material because it was controversial material, and I didn't trust publishing houses to edit things well. And what was really wonderful about that was that, I mean, very unexpectedly, the book took off. I didn't expect it to do that. And suddenly I'm selling thousands of copies of this thing. And I'm getting invited to speak at UCLA, and I'm getting invited to travel to Australia and travel, and speak there. And so eventually I got approached by a publisher who said, I want to take this book and do it right, and we want to take it over. And I was happy to have them do that because new research had come out that was really helping to make my case. And so I redid the whole thing again, and that became Primal Body, Primal Mind. And it became a second full-time job really fast. I had my own radio show for a while. I mean, and then I was seeing, clients for 10 hours a day, and it was just crazy. And I didn't write it for fame or fortune. It was like 8 books in one. If I'd have been thinking in terms of marketing, I probably would have broken it up into a bunch of little books. But I just wanted to take these ideas and help people connect dots that I had connected. And then I wrote another book called Rethinking Fatigue that kind of brings the subject matter of adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout, whatever, into the light of the 21st century. And then finally, I managed to get a contract with Simon & Schuster to write my most recent book, which is Primal Fat Burner, which sort of a double entendre. And yeah, that was an epic thing. The original manuscript for that book was over 300,000 words and more than 3,000 peer-reviewed references. And
Mm.
Simon
Mhm.
and Schuster, well, they came to me and they said, build us a boat. And I thought, okay. So I built this beautiful Viking ship with, all the intricate woodwork and everything else and all the details. And they presented it to them and they went, yeah, no, we just sort of wanted a rubber dinghy. So I had to cut out 2/3 of the content and 9/10 of the peer-reviewed references, which I had to do battle with them over. Um, and I'm actually pretty pleased with the outcome of it. It's just there was a lot of material I wanted in there that didn't
Mhm.
make it.
Yeah,
So,
well, you gotta hit the mainstream market. I guess they have their reasons.
well, I was on the Oz show once, and I had a long, long talk with his producer, whom I got along with really, really
Dr.
well.
Oz?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Mahmoud Oz, yeah, and and she and I talked for a couple of hours, and she said, "Oh my God, this is fantastic! This is amazing!" So I'm going to go through all these notes, and then I'm going to, I'll put a script together and get that to you. And I'm like, a script? What? And she said, "Well, yes, we script our show." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not an actress. I don't like scripts." And she said, "Well, we have to be very careful that about the language that gets used and whatever else. We don't want to confuse people." And she says, "Honestly, um, we have to create language that would be understandable to a 4-year-old." I'm like, "What?
Mhm. Mhm.
4 years old? Not 14, not fourth grade, 4 years old.
Wow.
That's the general public."
Just going to jump in real quick on this one. Remind you about nosetail.org. Support our local ranchers. We got great meat boxes. Get them shipped right to your door. Great prices on the pasture-raised pork. And of course, the beef tallow body care products. Hair care, deodorant, soap, lip balm. This is the stuff you want to use on your body. So check it out, nosetail.org. Thanks, guys.
Now, that's not what I appeal to in Primal Fat Burner at all. I'm stubborn about that stuff. I don't believe in dumbing anything down. I find that offensive, and I think people deserve better. I'd rather use analogies and things that can kind of lift people into maybe a different understanding of things. But at any rate, I think I'm very happy with what I did with that book, and I've since created some online content. I have a year-long certification course I teach. Um, that's sort of available, through primalcourses.com, and it's been really popular. And I also have something called the Primalgenic Plan, which is a more of a 3-week course designed to kind of help people adopt the way of eating that I talk about, handhold them through that process. And I make a case for why it's a good idea and all of that. But
Mhm.
so um, yeah, I
Lots
mean,
of things.
it's been a wild ride. And yeah, I'm it's been a while since I've been at any of these conferences, and I don't really travel anymore. I have a homestead to take care of. Um, and but I wouldn't trade my life right now for anything. So
I think a lot of people have that goal to one day just have that homestead and settle
the sooner the
down.
better.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So when was Primal Body, Primal Mind? When was that released?
Well, the first version of it was released back in 2009, I believe, um, early 2009. But then it was retooled and re-released into the form that I currently feel good about in 2011,
Okay.
and I still stand by at least 99% of everything in there. Some things have been updated a little bit, I guess, but nothing I would completely, throw out and start over with.
And then how did you wake up to this kind of way of thinking? Because it's really against the mainstream thinking, and it
Right?
wasn't very popular back then. I mean, there
No,
was, yeah.
even in the health genre, I mean, I was the first person to walk into the ancestral. Well, first off, when I first published Primal Body, there was no such thing as a paleo movement. I mean, there were some people writing articles here and there about the ideas behind an ancestrally based diet, but there was no quote unquote movement. And then suddenly I found myself on the crest of a wave, that was this huge thing taking off. And I had no idea I was a part of anything like that. But I was the only person that walked in with the idea of adopting uh, sort of a fat based ketogenic approach to ancestral health that also looked at longevity research and things like that to kind of tweak it into something that would be applicable for the world that we live in today. The more quite a bit more hostile and challenging world that we live in today, I might add. So,
Mhm.
um, and it was, I mean, it made waves, but it was not popular because I think most people had the idea that is, well, just eat real food and that's all. And my background is very steeped in not just science but functional medicine and concepts, and I've done so many different things in my life that everything about the way I think is sort of a cumulative montage of all these different ways in which I've come to kind of connect various dots into a bigger picture that I think makes the most sense. So I mean, I look at basic human physiology and also on where we came from ancestrally, um, and what kind of world we evolved in, what were the selective pressures that shaped our physiological makeup and our basic nutritional requirements. But in my mind, just because our ancestors did something was not necessarily good enough reason for me to want to do the same thing, because there's no basis for assuming that everything that we put in our mouths, chewed up and swallowed, that didn't kill us was going to be equally optimizing for our health. So how do we know? Well, there are aspects to longevity research that kind of let lent clues to that mystery, and it turns out it dovetailed very nicely into the idea that fat as a fuel really needs to be central to how uh, we operate and function as human beings. We're uniquely adapted for that as a species, and that you know turns out anything that drives insulin is probably not such a good thing for us to be provoking on a daily basis, and that we want to minimize those things. And turns out that moderating protein is a much better idea than going whole hog carnivore, which our ancestors were much more carnivorous. Um, the work done through the Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, and they looked at um, the stable isotopic signals uh, from the bones of ancient humans and whatever else, and found that turns out we were higher level carnivores in many ways than bears, wolves, foxes, other things that we co-evolved with. And the way I reason that is that prior to the end of the last, well, it's a misnomer, the end of the last ice age. We're still in it. It's the Quaternary Ice Age. We're in the Holocene. But, we share the planet with at least 120 species of megafauna that disappeared in the blink of an eye, about a little over 10,000 years ago in a fairly cataclysmic fashion. And those animals were not only, massive, that they carried a lot of body fat, and we hunted them preferentially to almost anything else for a long time. Um, and so certainly when when the majority of them died off, it left us with animals that were much smaller, leaner, more fleet of foot, that were harder to catch in some ways. And most people kind of embracing the paleo, I guess, way of doing things are really focused on the last few thousand years of what hunter-gatherers did. But it doesn't go back quite far enough for me. And as you know, I also serve on the board of the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation, which, not to be confused with the Weston A. Price Foundation, which is kind of centered more around Sally Fallon and her ideas about Weston Price and whatever. But we're a 71-year-old organization that owns the entire repository of Weston Price's work, all his photographs, letters, all his manuscripts, and all of
Mhm.
that. All is Francis Pottinger's stuff, Royal Lee's stuff. That we curate the work of a number of nutritional pioneers. And anyway, Weston Price was my introduction to the ancestral perspective. I had spent time on Ellesmere Island, living with a family of wild wolves back in 1991.
Mm.
And there was a lot that I experienced there that started to reshape my thinking about what the human diet might have originated as. And then I came back and I stumbled across nutrition and physical degeneration, and it opened up a whole world. But Price's story was really, really important, and it was really unique. And I'm very passionate about what we're doing at Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation. But for me, in my early days of figuring things out, even that didn't go back far enough. I really wanted to understand how we emerged you know, um, as an intelligent bipedal, species capable of making tools and whatever else. And so, and the importance of dietary fat provided that answer. And one of the questions, well, so as we know, I'm sure your audience is really familiar with Weston Price, right?
Mhm.
He traveled the world 100,000 miles over 10 years, and at this really unique time in history where we had just developed air travel, and yet um, there were still a multitude of so-called primitive, indigenous, and also traditional societies that were operating in a way that they had for a very, very, very long time. And there were also some of the same people from these cultures that were beginning to enculturate into the Western way of doing things, and more consuming more, sort of modern industrialized foods and things. And so, he traveled all over the place, carefully, meticulously, photographing and chronicling everything he did, taking samples of everything people ate, and looking at how that visibly affected their health and well-being. And he looked at burial remains and all this stuff. And of course, found that people who had been doing things the way they had done them for a very, very long time, these ancient cultures and indigenous populations, were by far the healthiest people that he encountered. So, what most people took from all of that is, well, just eat real food. And yes, you'll do better if you just use that mantra and go forward with it. But he asked himself a very important question. And that question was, what do all of the healthiest people that I studied, what did they have in common? And there were two things that were very consistent. Number one, He searched the world trying to find a vegetarian or vegan culture, couldn't find it, anywhere. He was quite disappointed about that. But he found that the healthiest populations he studied were those that consumed as many animal source foods as were available to them in the greatest variety. But also, he found that in every single instance of a people group that appeared to have just really radiant, robust health, the most sacred food, the most important food, the most sought after food in those places were those that were highest in fat and fat soluble nutrients,
Mm.
and that was consistent among all of them. That really impressed him as having radiant health. And to me, that's the foundational basis. It's the starting point for every human being alive. Figuring out that animal source foods. There's a war on animal source foods right now. There's an effort to eliminate them, right, from our world, from our diets. And we have to resist that with everything we have. Insects ain't going to cut it. Lab grown meat and plant meats, whatever the hell that is, ain't going to cut it. That we evolved meat of animals that synthesized not just protein, but a huge variety of critical nutrients we can't get any other way. And many of the core fat soluble nutrients are excellent examples of that. True vitamin A, retinol, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2, MK4, not the crap that is sold in health food stores as MK7, which is kind of a scam, and most people haven't figured that out, unfortunately. MK4 is the form that we evolved consuming, and it comes from pastured animal fats. It's very high in poultry fats and liver. Um, and It's the only form of K2 that is found in the human brain, and the only form that is allowed to cross the umbilical blood of a pregnant
Mm.
woman into her fetus. Otherwise, the MK7 doesn't do that. MK7 doesn't do anything much for us, actually. So it's a bit of a concern. And the only natural form of that I'm aware of that you can get it's a food-based form, but it's in a really highly concentrated form. There's a company called Walkabout Health Products, and they're friends of mine, but I don't have any financial ties to them at all. And they're only friends of mine because I've been so impressed with the work they've done.
Mm.
And they have a specific strain of emu oil that is the highest, measures the highest levels of K2 found in any food or supplement or anything anywhere. It's pretty awesome stuff. So, um, but otherwise, it's found in grass-fed ghee. It's found in. I mean, I don't do dairy products, but there's one particular. Pure Indian Foods has a cultured ghee that is actually free of residual proteins, so it's safe for somebody that has an immune reactivity to dairy.
Mm.
Um, anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but yeah,
The Weston Price stuff is amazing. So he found, yeah, that the cultures that valued fat the most were the healthiest. And I actually visited the Maasai a couple years ago,
that's awesome.
and they are amazing. Like I visited the Hadza as well, and they are left to hunt the smallest little animals, and they have
Well,
no.
it's illegal for them to hunt elephants anymore, which were a popular source of
Oh, yeah,
nutrition.
yeah. So the Hadza pushed off their land. All the big animals are in the game reserve, so the government can make money off them from the tourists, and they're left to hunt tiny little bush babies and little whatever they can get and baboons. And yeah, I ate a little dik with them. I didn't want to eat the baboon. I wasn't really into that. But yeah, they don't have much fat. But then the Maasai, they would do the blood and the milk. Everyone knows about that, and they slaughter goats and cows once in a while, and so they just rotate that. So they were still tall, strong, super wide jaw, just so healthy. So that, yeah, I mean, Weston Price went and saw them.
That's wonderful that you had the opportunity to do that. I was friends with Jeff Leach for a while. I haven't talked to him in years now, but I know he'd spent quite a bit of time with the Hadza as well. And they did eat a lot of honey during certain times of the year, but they had also developed a genetic polymorphism that didn't um, that prevented honey from creating insulin resistance,
Mm.
which was bizarre, but it's a unique polymorphism to that particular culture. So, you know, uh,
Wow.
but at any rate, variety I think is really important. And even though I see plants as more of a side dish, um, they do provide dietary diversity for us and make things interesting. I think just eating nothing but meat and fat all the time would be boring as hell. Um, and so I think that, and also because of the assault that our microbiome is under and everything else, that um, that microbial diversity in the gut is correlates strongly to dietary diversity. And that includes with animal source foods and various organs and tissues and things like that. And trying to maximize the variety that you get from those things is going to, because the collagen fiber and whatever in animals is actually an even more powerful prebiotic than plant fiber,
Hmm.
than cellulose.
Yeah.
But consuming varieties of things is really good for creating varieties of wildlife, shall we say, in your lower GI tract, and that's very helpful in terms of immune function and other
Well,
things. So
absolutely. And I really push back against these studies of the you have to eat like 100 grams, the HUDs ate 100 grams of fiber per day, all that type of stuff. I went there, they were chewing on these roots that, yes, they did have to survive on some of these tubers, and they cooked them and then you chew on them, but you can't eat the fiber. You have to spit out the fiber. I ate it with the women,
yeah,
and you're not eating the fiber. And
right.
what you are getting, and I do agree with the sort of diversity or gut microbiome, but it's also, yeah, I mean, you could eat little herbs and lots of little things. It's not like it was the Dr. Grieger vegan guy making the salad that's, gigantic. That's not what they were
No.
doing. And
Well, we don't have four stomachs, and we don't have the fermentative digestive tract of an herbivore. We have a hydrochloric acid based digestive system that is designed to make primary use of animal source foods. And the only macronutrient out of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates for which there's literally not one single human dietary requirement, not in any medical textbook of human physiology, not anywhere, is carbohydrate. We don't have to have it, but I think that plants can certainly offer some medicinal benefit at times. Think of things like turmeric and garlic, and some of the herbs that you find growing in the forest that have medicinal value. Um, I think that there's something to be said for plants as medicine. But hopefully, if you eat well enough, you might not need the medicine.
hmm,
So
no,
anyway, yeah,
well, yeah, yeah, it's a way different way to think about it as a medicine or as like a staple of food, which is somehow the message today. And then another thing I think as well, we were eating off the ground. We were eating off a rock. I got there and they opened up the little dik and they had a knife that's never been washed. They have
right.
hands that have
Mud
never
and
been.
feces and blood and urine and everything everywhere. Right? Yum.
Yeah, and no, the piece of liver they cut me was covered in the guts. They threw the guts. The dogs, they have a pack of dogs that help them hunt, and they got the guts. But this piece of liver was yellow and white and like all the different stuff on it, and I just ate
Oh,
it.
yeah,
I felt great. The whole
yeah,
trip
yeah,
I felt amazing. Like, I ate all kinds of weird stuff, eating off the ground, and felt amazing. I feel like my gut microbiome got better.
yeah. It probably did. Yeah, for sure. And of course, we have these endospore forming probiotics that you can get now. That that's the way we got our probiotics. It wasn't, from lacto fermenting things or whatever else. Anything that we consume as like lactobacillus and bifidus and whatever through capsules, it just ends up getting destroyed by the hydrochloric acid. There may be metabolic modifying effects that provide some benefit, but you're not going to recolonize your large intestine with that. It takes the endospore forming stuff that lives in soil, and that's the way we always got it, with our food, not refrigerated and then taken on an empty stomach away, which makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Like you're actually eating dirt. Yeah, I've heard, there's the soil based probiotic spore based and stuff. And it's like, no, we actually just got those because we were on the ground eating.
like every creature gets their probiotics that way. I mean, they've even found these endospore forming bacteria in bumblebees and various other things. It's very stable and protected in the ground. When we consume it, it leaves its sporulated form when it recognizes the signaling from our digestive tract and emerges, and it helps get rid of pathogens, and it helps to feed the good guys, and it takes up residence for a couple of weeks and then forms another little spore over itself and passes on through in the hope of eventually being reconsumed someday. I mean, there's a ton of soil bacteria, and most of it's there for the fertility of the soil, but there are some specific strains of endospore forming um, microbes that are really, really important to our health. And of course, we live in such and boy, and especially the last 3 years, hyper sanitized world that we're just not getting the exposure that we need to those things. you know um, and so anyway, um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I I think there's a lot we're doing. I washed my hands less during the last 3 years. I was like, I'm not into this at all. I'm not going to use the Purell. I never did.
No, I didn't either.
But it's also interesting in Africa, in Tanzania, they just didn't do the COVID thing. They were kind of just like, it was two and a
And
half
they
years
did the
ago.
best of anybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I went there it was 3 years ago, almost coming up, and they just didn't do it. You walk around, they're non-existent.
Right.
They were packed in the city. We flew into the city and people were in a like 12-person van and they had 20 people in the van, just
Right.
all packed in there. People have this idea, oh, they're spread out. Oh, it's Africa. They're just in their little village. I'm like, no, Africa
No,
has cities. Like, what are you talking about?
look, the human immune system evolved over countless millennia, and and is strengthened through exposure. That's how it works. With all of the billions and billions of so-called viruses and and all kinds of microbes and various things that we've encountered from time immemorial, that we've obviously overcome well enough to still be here. We've overcome through exposure, through strengthening through exposure, and then developing natural immunity. And I never did the COVID thing either. In fact, that was one of the things that drove me out of Portland, because the belly of the beast. Um, I really had a great life there for the time that it lasted, but when I saw what was happening, I realized that the quality of life that I had enjoyed there, and all of the things, all the places and people, it was over. And it was time to go. That things were not going to get better. It wasn't what was happening was not going to get better. It was going to get worse, because whoever the architects were of this whole, can I say, shit show, um, they were playing for all the marbles. And I, nothing that we were being told about what was happening made any sense to me. And the deeper I dug into what was happening, and into all of the immunological stuff, and looking into what kind of injections were coming down the pike and what the history of those were, and I thought, holy crap, we were literally told to do the opposite of what we should have been doing. I don't understand why, the idea of hiding in a bubble, with gloves and a mask and Purell and whatever else for 2 weeks, or you know, or for however long, how that was going to fix anything. It's not like a toxic cloud of gas was just passing over the city and was going to be gone in a couple of
Just gonna
weeks. We could all
hide for
emerge.
2
It's
weeks.
like,
Oh man.
yeah, it was a gradual way of sort of incrementally creating a very shut down society, And I am so deeply human and humanistic, and watching something so dehumanizing happening to the population it was a bit too much for me. I couldn't be around it.
Hmm.
Masks were an absurdity from the outset. It
Yeah.
never made any sense at all. So I, traveled through 5 different states, and and looking for, basically an off-grid property. And I finally found one that I'm extremely happy with, and it's completely upended everything having to do with my life, but really in the best possible way. I'm
That's
pretty
yeah.
self-sufficient here and able to produce my own food. And I just, we just had Thanksgiving, and this was the first year I was able to prepare an entire meal from just what came off the property. And that was great.
I want to hear more about it. But yeah, just in general to close out that topic, I'm
Yeah.
really glad that pretty much everyone in this community was on the same page, right? If you kind of woke up to the sick care system years ago, you woke up to just yeah, real food, ancestral lifestyles, you didn't buy into what was going on.
Well,
And
that's just it. Yeah. I mean, think of how long we've been lied to about, animal, about red meat and cholesterol and, saturated fat and all this kind of stuff. We've known, I mean, I've known for 20 years or more, that was BS. Um, and no matter how much evidence we bring to bear. In fact, I gave a talk at Montana State University at AHS called Navigating the Matrix. You can still find it on YouTube, surprisingly. But you can find that. I could see where things were going, and I knew that, um, you know the ancestral health community seemed kind of surprised that, and Nina Techholz was doing some really great work and just bringing the science to the people's making the food recommendations at USDA, et cetera, U.S. Department of Agriculture, hint, hint. Um, but and they every single year without fail, when they did their U.S. News and World Report, I think did its top 100 diets or whatever, you know, paleo and ketogenic approaches always landed dead last behind Jenny Craig crap and, you know, Ensure and, whatever else. And it's, and I wear that as a badge of honor, because I think if you do pretty much the opposite of what the mainstream narrative tells you to do, you're probably doing fairly all right. And so it was obvious that for a long time, that good science and good evidence and just logical common sense was being ignored in favor of certain narratives that sold certain medications or certain food products or food-like products. And so I think, a lot of us were primed for recognizing BS when we heard it. But, it was quite an effort at creating mass panic on a global scale. And unfortunately, it's, the results of that have been catastrophic, for is particularly the Western world.
for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, really bad, but at least it woke people up. It also did some good is that a lot of people moved out of those cities like Portland or Seattle or LA, like I did, got out of there and have grouped in other places that are more free and have become, you know, stronger friends and with people that have the like-minded values. And I think it's gotten people together more in this like sub it's like a society within a society, I call it. You
Well, yeah.
actually left. You're actually like off grid, but you can still be in the
No,
society.
I do have a social life here. It's not like I'm just like communing with squirrels, um, cute as they are. But that what I think the ultimate answer is to everything is complete decentralization of whatever the system has been, and the creation of localized parallel economies and food systems is the only way we get through this. because things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse. I do think if you have the means, if you're living in a city and you have the means, by all means, get out. There's no good that can come from being in a city, and particularly with with what's coming, um, and figure out where your networks are. Nurture those networks of human beings in your life, but especially the localized systems. And I have a unique situation where I'm able to be relatively self-contained, and self-sustaining, and I don't have to worry about blackouts. I don't have to worry about whatever. Um, but I think most people are in a situation where, well, Fred over here raises chickens, and Carl over here has a great vegetable garden, and so over here is really great at hunting, and so here goes fishing all the time. And you make your connections with people in your local communities who um, who uh, are doing at least a part of something that can be self-sustaining, and then come together. And that was kind of the idea behind, that we've created something called the Food Freedom Project at the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation, and which we're working really hard now to turn this into a legitimately activistic organization that is going to be working very hard toward helping people create these localized communities, these parallel economies, and find different people that that can help you kind of put together something that is not just sustaining in terms of food and nourishment, but also bartering systems and various other things that can allow different people to share their strengths and their specialties and whatever with one another, and really create something that is mutually supportive and beneficial, that gives you safety in numbers and gives you a sense of community, which everything that's happened over the last 3 years has been a concerted effort to deprive us of community, to isolate us, to dehumanize us, to separate us from one another, little circles on the floor 6 feet apart, because viruses just can only jump 5 feet 11 inches, right? So yeah, so anyway, and that's how we get through this. And the more you can figure out how to do things off grid, the less dependent you are on centralized systems for energy and production and whatever else. I mean, the longer you're going to live and the happier you're going to be.
Yeah, no, I love the food freedom thing. I've talked to some other of the Price Pottinger people about it
Yeah,
recently, and I've been talking about this stuff forever, decentralized food systems and doing it with
yeah, so have I.
beef, like just raising animals. And what do you, so yeah, I was going to ask about your current place and what are you raising out there? How are you surviving?
Well, so I had to kind of sort through what it is I wanted to do. I mean, I live in the wilderness, and so there's plenty of tasty wildlife around, for hunting, and I'm just a few strides from some, of the most pristine rivers and world class fishing, and all of that, which is great. But if the food store shelves go empty, and they probably will at some point, everyone and their dog is going to be up in the hills trying to kill everything that moves up here to feed themselves and their families. So to create better, just I'm always thinking like an Eagle Scout, like, okay, so if this is going on, what do I need? Okay, so then what if that fails? Well, then I have to have this backup and that backup, So, um, and I consulted with some people that I knew who were really expert at homesteading and off grid living and all of that. I know some amazing people, and one of the things that was presented to me as a really good option are meat rabbits, of all things,
Hmm.
because So there are a variety of reasons where those are really great, and actually great even for people living in suburban areas, or theoretically even in an apartment, because they don't take up necessarily a lot of space, and they're quiet. They don't attract a lot of attention from two or four-legged predators. They're fairly clean and animals, and they breed like, well, rabbits. I mean, a single doe can generate up to 350 pounds of meat in a year from if you're breeding her aggressively enough.
Wow.
Um, I mean, we had a rabbit roast for Thanksgiving that I'm still eating the leftovers. I'll probably be eating them for another couple of weeks.
Wow.
It's like crazy how much meat you get off the can. It depends on the breed of rabbit, and there are different breeds, and I have thoughts about that. Um, but they not only this, but and you can get a lot of fat on them. Actually,
Oh,
again,
really?
depending on the breed. Yeah, wild rabbits extremely lean. You've heard of rabbit starvation. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
interested in hunting wild rabbits, but the domesticated varieties, some are much better than others at packing on quality fat, and a lot of it depends on what you feed them. They're herbivores also. So you can theoretically feed them. Well, for starters, if you're going to be buying feed, it's way cheaper than it would be to feed a chicken or whatever.
Mhm.
But also, uh, you can also, if you do things right, feed them entirely from what grows on your property if you know how to do it right. And so it doesn't have to cost anything. Furthermore, what comes out of them is is as valuable as anything else about them, because it's like the best fertilizer you could possibly get. And it's cold fertilizer, meaning you can just like hold the rabbit over your vegetable bed and just, you know, dispense what comes out of them like Pez into your garden, and it just makes your plants super happy. So I've heard people say that if you are, raise rabbits, if for no other reason, you're just going to use them for the fertilizer they produce. It's amazing fertilizer. And so lots and lots of very good reasons to have those. Also, because I live in a wilderness environment, I don't want to hear mooing. I don't want to hear the sound of goats, although we do get cows wandering through here from because it's a free range state and they run loose, and I call the ranchers to come pick them up, please. But I want to hear the wind and the sounds of nature. So the other thing that I have is I have some ponds on my property, some spring fed ponds, and so I have some ducks, and they're amazing egg producers, and they're also extremely hardy. They tolerate winter really, really well. And they all have little down jackets on, right? Um, and I'm mainly raising them for the eggs that they produce. And I've never eaten so much quiche or deviled eggs in my whole life, and I've got this glut of eggs in my fridge that So that's complete protein, and it's actually duck eggs are much more nutrient dense than chicken eggs. They're richer. They have, in my view, much better flavor. You can make a whole omelet from just a single egg. They're huge, and yeah, I mean, and it's a potential bartering item, right? It's currency. So
So you sounds like you don't necessarily need big animals. You can just do ducks and meat rabbits and be perfectly good.
well, again, there are also again, it's easy to find places to go fishing. It's easy, to hunt things around here too. Um, and I have, some elk and venison in my freezer as well. But if worst comes to worst, I'll still be able to generate my own animal source foods, and I'm able. The way I have my duck area set up, it's mostly self-sustaining. They're able to forage for most of what they need. They're excellent foragers. Um, and so, to me, that's, sort of the goal, not just figuring out how to raise your own protein, but all, and fat, obviously, but also how to set things up on your land so that you can just feed whatever you have from what's already there, as opposed to having to go out and buy feed,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
and
it's
that kind
great.
of thing.
What other type of plant life do you have? I mean, or you have a garden?
Have a massive orchard, more than what I would want or need, I think, but it's here, and so it's mature, and something like 30 trees and bush shrubs and lots of huge variety of berries and whatever. The previous owner and previous couple of owners had really done a lot to create a food forest around here.
Mm.
And there are dozens of food producing trees, nut producing trees, and all kinds of things all over the property. And so um, there's a lot of wild forage. We get fabulous morels here and shaggy mane and things like that you can different times of the year. Um, and and so there's a really wide variety of both wild forage and also just things growing all over the woods around the property that are designed to be food producing. I'm friends with Jim Gale, Food Forest
Yeah, yeah.
Abundance, and I'm
He's come to
also,
Austin a couple times to hang out.
yeah, and there a couple people that work for him are really close friends of mine. In fact, they may end up living here at some point, but and it's that whole idea of whatever you plant, you're thinking in terms of how is this going to add to my ecosystem, right? In a way that allows me to um, uh, allows this to be a more self-sustaining kind of environment. And like the duck pond, which has some stocked with some minnows and bluegills and some crayfish and things like that, and which are also food sources for the ducks and also for me. Um, but all of the water in there, which is uh, some of the minnows actually are really good at keeping the water clean, at cleaning out what the ducks and the I have a goose also, what they produce that we might not want so much of. And we have a tank. We'll pump the water from the ponds into a large stock tank up on top of the hill, and then gravity feed it down to the orchard, and the gardens, and it's compost. I mean, it's nutrient dense water, that can use to fertilize everything here. So, and there's also have a 28-foot greenhouse. It's a 4-season greenhouse, um, and some also raised garden beds and things. And I also have some hydroponic stuff going on inside the house. Um, that during the winter months you can still get greens and stuff like that, and grow different herbs and things. Um, and so it's a everything that we do here is designed to kind of sustain itself, and just constantly looking at new ways of expanding and improving upon that. But I have, it's well enough established now, and it's certainly a lot of work, but it's really rewarding, and I'm leading a much more ancestrally aligned life than I ever used to, and everything that happens here is in alignment with the rhythms of the seasons and of whatever's happening with the weather, um, and it's the yard is filled with deer and elk, and you see mountain lions walking through the yard, and bears and things like that, and it's awesome. It's like living in a Disney movie, without the
Mhm.
pedophiles, but whatever.
You got to get a good crack at Disney. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. This sounds like a dream. And I don't know if everyone needs to do it. Some people, I don't want to turn people off because some
No,
people are like, all right, I'm not going to do that. Like, I have a job, but you can
sure.
still
There's
live.
stuff you can do even if you live I mean, I don't recommend living in a high-rise apartment if you can help it. The more you can do to get out of the city, the better. But again, you can create, like, I've expressed the idea that what I have here is a very kind of unique situation, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it is a lot of work, and all of that. And it's next to impossible to find something like this anymore. It's very, very difficult now to go out and find land and all of that. If you haven't done it, you need to do it yesterday.
Mm.
It's not something you're like, oh yeah, in a couple of years maybe I'll do that. I wouldn't wait that long. But what I will say is that wherever you are, there are local farmers trying to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. And some of those farmers are selling their stuff publicly. Some of them are just people like me doing things in their backyard that you can align with to secure some some part of what they're doing in exchange for something you can contribute back to them, right? This is about creating networks and communities of people that, and also to start thinking in terms of, well, what can I do at home? Even if it's growing sprouts on your windowsill, at least that's something. Um, there are animals like I mentioned rabbits. There are also quail. Are they're small and they proliferate readily. They produce eggs, tiny eggs, but um, they're actually kind of an amazing and accessible way of getting into raising livestock if you want to do that. Not everybody's cut out to do that, and I understand that. Um, I'm not somebody that finds it easy to take a life. Easier for me with hunting and fishing than it is with something that I've raised. So part of what I do, I have there's an Alaskan Native woman that we've become friends with that lives locally, who her whole life is just she's processed animals and done all that kind of stuff, and so she helps us with that and brings a beautiful kind of very sort of sacred approach to doing it that we feel good about. Um, and I think if I was hungry enough, I could probably do what needed to be done, but it's not really in my nature. I'm kind of a nurturer and protector, and all of that, um, and it's that aspect of things is really really hard for me. But I also recognize that there's a cycle of life and death of which I'm a part,
Yeah.
and so um, it's
First,
a process getting to that place where I'm actually looking in the eyes every day of something that may end up on my dinner plate someday. It's very very different way um of I don't know, looking at the food that you eat. And I believe that we take it into our bodies differently. I don't know that there's ever been any good research done with that, but it's a very different experience consuming something that you have a personal relationship with, even if it's only through the scope of a gun,
mm-hmm.
where you've been able to look into the eyes of something that you later consume is, it's a deeply humbling thing. And when we sit down to eat that kind of meal, it is a very different attitude bring to it than if you buy something shrink wrapped at the store or something. You know,
Yeah. And that's how we always did it. Yeah, I think we always had that connection to the food. I think part of this big agenda is to kind of disconnect people from that
yeah,
more and more. And that's why we have vegans. We didn't have vegans before, as Weston Price saw.
right.
It's just,
Well, but to me, the whole vegan vegetarian movement is just simply symptomatic of how far removed we've become from the natural environment in which we evolved. When if you're out there, I mean, it's snowing today here, and it's woke up in the temperatures we're in the teens, and if I was out in the woods eking out my existence in a slightly less comfortable environment, I can tell you the last thing that I'd be dreaming of would be a salad. You know,
mhm. Yeah.
it's like, and in fact, there's really not much of anything growing right now that would be edible to anyone that had that sort of vegan mindset. It's just not a way of living that is in alignment with your natural essence, your ancestral
Hmm.
roots at all. And it serves a purpose, for people with certain agendas, I guess, but it's not how we evolved. And I think that more than anything else, we need to be championing and doing everything possible to preserve access to animal source foods right now, because that could get taken away from us very, very quickly.
Oh, I post about it all the time. You see the UN and the WHO, and there's always these big organizations, that worldwide organizations, like funded by, certain people that have this agenda, and that it's all tied in. And then now there's like the carbon credits, and it's gonna be okay, you can only have this amount, and it's very clear. And you sometimes you post about it, and then the normies will be like, "Oh, you guys are conspiracy people." I'm like, they are telling us that
Just
you
because
have to
something's
limit.
called a conspiracy doesn't mean it's not true, right?
Yeah.
There have been lots and lots and lots of conspiracies, and I mean, I almost get tired of every one of these getting proven right on a daily basis. I don't know what rock you have to be living under to not see what's happening now. You have to be willfully ignorant, I think, at this point, and just trying to push reality out of your mind. Whatever it takes to be able to deal, I guess. But I'm I believe in, my favorite supplement to take every day is that red pill, and when it comes out to it, I am actually more of a white pill person in terms of I believe in the invincibility of the human spirit. I believe in the core of what makes us best as human beings. And ultimately, I believe in truth, you know, um, and I believe that those things ultimately prevail. But it's just a question of what the body count is going to be along the way, and how quickly people are able to kind of wake up and take the steps necessary to secure a future for themselves and people they love. You have to, I mean, it's a nice thing when you're asleep and you're dreaming of sitting on a white sandy beach and, surrounded by cabana boys peeling you grapes and whatever else. And your house is on fire, and it's no fun to be woken up out of that dream to have to deal with the reality that's happening around you. But much better to be woken up out of that dream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think people listening are. So I have one more thing before we kind of start to wrap it up. I really want to
sure.
get back into that really like ancestral human diet, and going back further than, yeah, like after the Younger Dryas impact, which probably around 11,000 years ago when the big
Hmm.
animals started dying off. Have you heard of Paleo Medicina from Hungary?
No.
They do, they call it the Paleolithic ketogenic diet, and they use the most ancestral diet. So before then, when we had access to the giant megafauna, we had more fat, more meat, and yeah, we didn't have to rely on, say, baking tubers like the Hadza have to do now, and gnawing on some glucose that comes out of
Yeah,
that. So I feel like that well, they are doing some great things in Hungary using these most ancient diets to cure really crazy cancers and reversing type 1 diabetes that they thought couldn't be done. They have these small case studies of, and then of course just doing, normal like type 2
right.
diabetes, reverse stuff like that. But
Well, so through the approach that I take to things ultimately moderates protein and uses fat as a primary source of caloric intake, from a variety of preferably more animal source foods. But if you're moderating your protein and you're using fat as your primary source of fuel, you'll have what you need, but you won't need as much. You're not hungry all the time. These preppers that are sitting in bunkers, with their buckets of grains and beans and rice, just have it all wrong. Or the MREs and things, that stuff just drives me crazy. Or saving seeds is great and fine and good, and growing your tomato and zucchini is fine. You can't live on that. I'm sorry, but you really kind of can't. Human brain isn't designed to run on that stuff. It's a fat machine. So And when you are doing things more ketogenically, and of course there's many different definitions of ketogenic as there are people practicing it, just like paleo. Um, that, but if you're doing it right, you're you're in autophagy a lot of the time. You're minimizing mTOR, and those things not only are regenerative, but the minimizing mTOR also helps to minimize the potential for cancer cell proliferation, because having a cancer cell isn't what kills you. It's when that metastasizes and it proliferates. And mTOR is the impetus for that in every form of cancer there is. And so by minimizing that, you're also minimizing your risk for that kind of problem. So, yeah, the dietary approach I've been talking about for well over a decade now is ultimately the best solution to being able to get through the more difficult times that are coming. Most people on a sugar-based, glucose-based metabolism aren't more than maybe, a couple of missed meals from a state of total metabolic, emotional, mental chaos, right? That I did an experiment once where I would, folks, don't try this at home, please, but I went 21 days without eating anything. I drank water. I had a little, cup of tea in the morning, that kind of thing. And it sucked from the standpoint of like, food is so much a part of who we are as human beings. It's how we come together, at meals and all that kind of stuff. And it's fun to think about like, oh, what are we going to make for breakfast or dinner today or whatever. And then it's like, oh, shoot, I'm not eating anything. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was like having an itch that you couldn't quite scratch
Mm-hmm.
but I was just as mentally alert and just as had just as much energy at day 21 that I did at the outset, because I went into it already ketogenically well adapted. And so I never had the big crashes and the irritability and the fatigue and all the stuff that people experience, and feeling famished. Or I wasn't famished. I was okay. And then I thought, okay, 21 days, me and Gandhi, right? Okay, I'm done. I'm not going back to eating now. Um, but it was a really, really interesting exercise, and to understand that you're less that when the food that you eat is so nutrient dense that you don't need to eat that much of it, and then you're using fat as a primary source of fuel. It's like having that log on the fire, right? I always use that wood
Mm-hmm.
stove analogy. You have that nice big log on the fire, and you can go about your business and do what you have to do. And the log starts burning down. Well, add another log, and then you can go and you can sleep through the night, and you can have the energy that you need to get through the day. And um, rather than having, making, I don't know, um, all these little packets of food that you can buy that's sort of uh, from survival, prepper stores and things like that. Just having a really nice bar pemmican,
Mm-hmm.
around.
Yeah.
Super lightweight. I mean, if you live in an RV, you could stock up that RV with pemmican and
Mm-hmm.
you'd be fine. If it's made properly, it's a complete food unto itself. A good friend of mine just, he's just getting ready to release it. And strangely, I don't have a financial stake in it, but I did help him with the project um, for the time that it took him to put it together. But he created, I think, the first authentic pemmican product, and it's through Wild Mountain Paleo. I don't have a one here to show you, but they're actually taste pretty decent, and they have a very, very long shelf life.
Mm. Does it use any berries in it, or is it just the meat and fat?
No, it's just mainly, he has one that he puts a tiny little bit of honey in, and it's not really enough to have,
It's
if
not, yeah,
but
like
it's
sweetness. Yeah, it's just
right, and that's not cloying sweetness, but it's something to kind of offset the savory thing. I think there's an organ meat one, which I think would be the most nutritionally complete, and then there is a salt one, just a salted meat one, and another one that has a little bit of honey in it. I think it's 3 or 4 varieties that he has. I think eventually, if it does well, which I expect it will, because it's a really good product, it's made in the right way for the right reasons. I think it will eventually, he'll eventually add other things maybe along the way. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's great. But protein. So some people listening might be worried that you're saying moderate protein, but like I don't think you mean like what normal Americans do. Normal Americans aren't eating enough protein. They're eating processed foods, and their protein percentage of their diet is very low. So you're not saying like go low protein.
what I'm
You're
saying is about zero 0.8 grams per kilogram of estimated ideal body weight. So, I mean, it's, most people don't need more than like maybe 6 ounces of protein in a day, assuming your digestion is operating well. And if it isn't, work in your digestion. Don't add more protein to that. That's just going to putrefy. Um, so, what we actually need in order to run the human organism on a day to day basis and do the protein synthesis necessary to replace stuff that's damaged and whatever else is actually not that much. But it's the quality of, you know, I mean, you want that whatever protein you consume you want to be consuming it nose to tail. You want to incorporate organ meats to the degree that you're able to, because that's really where you get the biggest bang for your buck. Um, and you want that meat to come from animals that have been allowed to eat what is natural for them to eat,
Mhm.
living out in fresh air and sunshine, leading quality lives. I mean, the health of the meat and fat we consume directly corresponds to the health of the animals that meat and fat came from. So, really finding people that are raising animals in the best possible way, feeding them what is natural for them to eat, and you'll get the nutrient density from that you need, I think, to meet those requirements. And then, you can add plant foods as you're able to tolerate them. Some people have big problems with oxalates and, and phytates and other all kinds of other things, and have allergic reactions to certain foods and stuff. But, fibrous plants are fine. Not a big fan of the starchy stuff. But just trying to challenge yourself to incorporate a variety. Um, Also, take some foraging classes. There are all kinds of organizations out there and businesses that are trying to teach people, primitive skills that include things like how to, identify and procure and process wild plants and animals and things like that. I mean, learn about that stuff. You'll find that even if you live in a high rise, you can go to a city park near you and probably find quite a bit that would be, edible in a way that would be more enjoyable than you might think.
Mhm.
So,
That sounds like so if you're eating like meat rabbits and duck eggs and all this stuff and like how much per day? It sounds like you're eating a decent amount of protein.
well, that's not all that I eat. And that's, I mean, right now I have other things, in my freezer besides rabbit and other things in my fridge besides duck eggs. Those are just my fallback
Mm,
in case uh, in case meat becomes difficult to find or hunt or fish. Uh, so I just sort of, I probably eat 2 meals. I'll have something, late morning, early afternoon, and then around around dinner time, which is like around 5, 4 or 5 o'clock or whatever. We'll have just a small amount of stuff. The meals around here aren't big. Soups are actually really doing a lot of soups and things like that these days. It's you can get by less expensively if you do things like soups and stews and chili. I make a mean pot of chili, um, and then it's amazing how satisfied you can be on modest amounts of of food. You don't have to be, stuffing your face all the time.
Hmm.
Um, and um, so, yeah, I mean, I, we have what we need here. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, it
yeah,
sounds great. Yeah, I'm just a fan of people getting enough protein, and yeah,
yeah. But it's not just enough. It's also being able to digest that well. And the problem is being in a digestion, being this north to south process. If you're super stressed, digestion is a parasympathetic process. Also, you need to be in that calm, relaxed state. Very few people are doing very well at that, and so doing things to support digestion, taking hydrochloric acid supplements as needed. If you're not able to, break stuff down, but it's really, um, you know the quality of your digestion is just as important as the content of your diet. And I do worry about people over consuming not just protein but crappy protein, and from feedlot meat and stuff that's been injected with God knows what, um, and all of that. People really need to start thinking this stuff through and recognize that for the vast majority of our time on this planet as a species, uh, we didn't we didn't have to spend money on food. Food was just there, and we knew how to recognize it and procure it and process it and have divisions of labor, um, and a community of people that allowed us to have enough for most of the time. And so it's kind of a call to what we need to do again. That it is possible to feed yourself, uh, for little or nothing if you know what you're doing, and you have a community of people around you to support you in that effort. Really
it's
important.
That's a great message to go out on. Yeah, the community aspect, and yes, and people can have different tasks in that, and bartering for food. That's amazing. So, do you have a
Sure.
website you want to throw out?
Well, primalbody-primalmind.com is my kind of home website, and also primalcourses.com, where I have a variety of online courses and things. And I also do private consulting work, both from a functional medicine perspective, functional health, nutrition, but also I've been doing more to consult with people looking to try to figure out how how to make life changes in the
Mm,
face of what's happening in the world. The answer, as you point out, is not for everybody to go out and buy a bunch of land and start homesteading. That's an ideal, but there are lots of other ways of doing things wherever you are that can greatly improve your situation. And I'm very, very adept at at knowing. I mean, even when I lived in Portland, we were pretty much set for any natural disaster anyway that came along. We had things set up in a way that were really, um, um, where we felt fairly secure. It's just we didn't count on people losing their minds en masse. It was a real zombie apocalypse. It turned out, um, but there are lots of things that you can do wherever you are to be better prepared
mm,
and in a better situation going forward, so that you don't have to lose sleep at night worrying about starving to death or freezing to death or whatever. Lots of things you can do. So I'm good at knowing how to help people sort through their situations and make the best of the situations they have, or help them plan a way out if that's what they want to do.
mm. All right,
Yeah.
awesome stuff. Thanks for coming on, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, it was really great meeting you, Brian.
All
Really a
right, you as
pleasure.
well.
Thank you.